first rolled the captured American tank into their testing yard, they weren't expecting to be impressed. To them, the Americans were crude engineers, mass producers of cheap machines that flooded the battlefield by sheer numbers, not finesse. But as the Sherman's engine rumbled to life, smooth, steady, and dependable, something shifted. The men who built Tigers and Panthers suddenly went silent. Before the tests were over, one of them would quietly admit, "We never built anything this reliable." World War II wasn't only fought with bullets and bombs. It was fought with blueprints, gears, and steel. Every tank, every bolt told a story of the nation that built it. And in that clash of engineering philosophies, few stories are as surprising or as humbling as the moment when the German war machine met the American Sherman. In the early years of the war, German tanks were the envy of the world. The Panzer III and Panzer IV spearheaded lightning-fast blitzkrieg tactics across Europe, their precision mechanics reflecting a culture obsessed with craftsmanship. German engineering was like a symphony, complex, beautiful, and expensive. But by 1943, that symphony began to strain under its own perfection. The Tiger I, with its thick armor and massive 88mm gun, was a masterpiece on paper, and a maintenance nightmare in the field. Each Tiger took more than 300,000 man-hours to build. Its parts were so specialized that even minor repairs required workshops, cranes, and supply lines the collapsing Reich could barely sustain. The engineers were proud, but on the Eastern Front, pride froze and jammed in the mud. Engines overheated, tracks snapped, transmissions failed. A tank that couldn't move was nothing more than a steel coffin. Late 1943, in the chaos of the Italian campaign, German forces seized a peculiar prize, a fully intact M4 Sherman left behind by retreating Allied troops. To the Germans, it was an opportunity to study the enemy's so-called inferior design. They transported the Sherman to Kummersdorf, south of Berlin, where captured Allied equipment was routinely examined. When the American tank arrived, the German technicians laughed. To their eyes, it looked plain, almost crude. The armor was sloped but thin, the gun modest compared to the long-barreled 75mm of the Panther. Even the welding seemed unrefined. One officer reportedly scoffed, "Typical American, built like a tractor." But what they didn't realize was that this was precisely the point. The engineers began their inspection with mechanical curiosity. They noted how easily the engine bay opened, how every component was reachable with simple tools. No specialized wrenches, no delicate calibrations. It was almost civilian in its practicality. They drained the oil, tested the filters, and studied the drivetrain. Everything was straightforward. Color-coded wiring, labeled connectors, and modular assemblies that could be swapped out in minutes. One mechanic remarked that even a farmhand could service it. The senior engineer frowned, but took notes. Then came the first real test, the engine run. They fueled the Sherman, turned the ignition, and waited for the sound of American engineering. The motor didn't cough or stutter, it purred. Smooth, confident, ready. That steady hum filled the workshop like a quiet insult. The Germans drove the Sherman over dirt and gravel, up small inclines and through shallow water. Its Continental R975 radial engine handled every challenge without hesitation. Where a Tiger might have required constant gear changes and clutch finesse, the Sherman glided ahead with almost casual ease. The engineers noted the simplicity of its transmission, the forgiving suspension, and its generous steering controls. It wasn't elegant, but it was forgiving. That was something German tanks rarely were. After several hours, they opened the hatches and checked for stress or overheating. The oil levels were steady, the engine block barely warm. It was as if the tank had been built to be abused and still perform. That night, one engineer reportedly muttered under his breath, "They build tanks the way we build tractors, but perhaps that's smarter." The more they studied the Sherman, the clearer the contrast became. German tanks were designed for excellence, handcrafted precision pieces meant to dominate duels. The Americans, by contrast, designed for reliability, repairability, and mass production. A German Tiger's gearbox had hundreds of unique components, many machined to micrometer tolerances. A Sherman's transmission, on the other hand, could be replaced in under an hour with spare parts from another vehicle. The engineers realized something that unsettled them deeply. Every Sherman was almost identical. Every bolt, every nut, every fitting was standardized. This meant that an American crew at the front could cannibalize one tank to fix another. For Germany, whose workshops struggled just to supply matching parts, that was revolutionary. It was, as one engineer wrote in a quiet report, efficiency through simplicity. Over the next several days, the Germans dissected the Sherman like surgeons. They dismantled the turret rotation system, the gun stabilization gear, the cooling fans, and the electrical wiring. Each time, they expected to find shortcuts, corners cut for production speed. But what they found instead was logic. Everything had a purpose. Every design choice favored function over form. If a part could be simplified, it was. If it could be made stronger with less machining, it was. The Americans hadn't over-engineered their tanks. They had made them practical. One German report summarized the findings bluntly. The American tank is not built for elegance. It is built to work. That line would circulate quietly among the engineering offices at Kummersdorf. It wasn't admiration yet, but it was respect. To test endurance, the engineers ran the Sherman for 12 continuous hours, alternating between road and rough terrain. They expected breakdowns. Any machine would overheat under such strain. But the Sherman didn't. It kept moving, as steady as a metronome. They measured oil pressure, temperature, track tension, and engine response. Everything remained within limits. The tank that looked like a tractor refused to quit. By contrast, a Panther tested the same week suffered a transmission failure within 3 hours. When the report reached the head engineer, he simply wrote in the margin, "Unthinkable simplicity." After a week of testing, one senior engineer, his name lost in history, was asked his professional opinion. He was a man who had worked on the early Tiger prototypes, proud of German craftsmanship, but even he couldn't ignore what he had seen. He reportedly sighed and said, "We never built reliability like this. Ours are machines of war, beautiful but fragile. Theirs are machines of industry, ugly but eternal." That single statement captured the truth Germany didn't want to admit. The Sherman wasn't a masterpiece of engineering. It was a masterpiece of practicality. Germany's engineers were artists of metal. Each tank was hand-assembled, every part tested, tuned, and fitted. They believed in perfection, and perfection takes time. The United States, however, believed in production. Factories in Detroit, Cleveland, and Chicago churned out tanks like cars. Assembly lines built identical Shermans day and night. One tank could be repaired using the parts of another built thousands of miles away. A German engineer studying the process wrote almost in awe, "They have turned war into an industry." And in that realization lay Germany's defeat, not on the battlefield, but in the factory. Germany's often mocked the Sherman's armor and firepower. Against the Panther or Tiger, it seemed hopelessly outmatched. But the Allies didn't send one Sherman to fight one Tiger. They sent 5. And when a Tiger's gearbox broke after 50 hours of operation, those 5 Shermans kept rolling. When a Sherman broke down, its crew fixed it within hours. When a Tiger broke down, it was abandoned, or towed at best to a repair depot days away. Reliability, not raw power, decided who reached the battlefield first. By 1944, American mechanics were repairing tanks faster than German crews could fuel theirs. And so the engineers' verdict at Kummersdorf carried a bitter truth. Germany was losing the war not just to enemy soldiers, but to engineers who understood simplicity. The Sherman's brilliance wasn't obvious. It didn't need to be. Its Continental radial engine, originally designed for aircraft, was rugged, overpowered, and easy to maintain. Its suspension system, the vertical volute spring suspension, was crude but reliable and could be repaired with minimal tools. Even the Sherman's gun stabilization system, a simple gyroscopic device, was decades ahead of its time. It allowed the tank to fire accurately while moving, a feature German tanks wouldn't adopt until years after the war. So when German engineers took notes, they were writing the blueprint for the next era of tank design, the age when function would finally triumph over form. Not all the German officers were happy with the findings. Some dismissed them outright. "How can a tank so simple defeat ours?" one colonel scoffed. But the engineers knew better. They saw how the Sherman's parts fit together like a puzzle designed for speed and survival. They saw that a tank that worked most of the time was far more valuable than one that worked perfectly for an hour.